Hello again, everybody, and welcome to this global Azure session on Give Me Cloud Talks. Hopefully everybody's been enjoying global Azure. Want to thank all the organizers as well as all of the presenters globally, as well as for Give Me Cloud Talks. One of them I have with me right now, a fellow MVP, and somebody that I've presented in his events, and we've just presented on each other's events in the past, Alec Harrison, and he's going to do a session on Azure OpenAI. So take it away, Alec.
Sure, thanks. And thanks for putting this on. I know events can sometimes be stressful trying to coordinate everybody, so I appreciate it.
Sessionize has made it extremely easy, actually, but
it's
one thing really quick. I thank the organizers. I made this comment. So everything was able to go through like my GitHub for Give Me Cloud Talks. But since there are hundreds of global user groups that are doing global Azure sessions, I can just imagine the sheer volume of pull requests in GitHub that the organizers got and had to review and release for everything to go up in the globalazure.net site for creating a schedule for over 600 sessions and over 600 speakers globally for these 3 days. So that's why I've been trying on all these sessions, been making sure to give kudos to the organizers, but as well as the people doing all, the 600 plus community members and the hundreds of communities that are putting these sessions on globally. It's amazing. So
for sure. And I think you put a link before. So if you're looking for other content after this, or maybe you check out halfway through, Global Azure Days is a thing, and there's a bunch of talks out there. So if you find another topic or want to bounce to AI or something else deeper, I'm sure there's another topic presented somewhere else in the world. So plug for that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we got like one more after the years. There's one more session that I'm hosting today, but yeah, they're going on globally round the clock, pretty much. I think till tomorrow sometime. So, yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that introduction, and thanks for putting this on. I'll go ahead and kick this off. I'm a solution consultant at Lunavi. I'm an Azure nerd, and as Dwayne said, a Microsoft MVP. I also work with Brian. We put together some Azure Cloud workshops. So if you've heard of the Microsoft Cloud workshops, it's kind of our own flavor and taste on those, trying to keep them simple, very to the point, and make them as cost effective as possible. So that way, if you're learning on your own, you're not spending a couple $100s or being through potentially all of your Azure credits in like a Visual Studio Enterprise kind of situation. Co-organizer of the Iowa Microsoft Azure User Group and also the Kansas City Azure User Group. So if you want to check that out, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I plug those all the time. We do monthly Tuesdays and Wednesdays over lunch on just random Azure topics. So if you want more content like this year round, feel free to check out that. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to add me on LinkedIn, Slack, Discord, wherever you might have me. LinkedIn is my primary point of contact, so feel free to add me there, and we can talk about anything and everything cloud. So the impetus of this talk was I wanted to play with OpenAI, and I wanted to have something that was more realistic in real world, a solution that maybe already existed today or existed historically. And it led me to this. It used to be called Cha-Cha. There was a bunch of different services back in the day. Put your mind back a little bit, like in the late 2000s. Phones started getting data plans. Wi-Fi was hit or miss in public places. But most people at that point had like unlimited texting. So there was search engines like Cha-Cha that rolled out where you could essentially text. It was like a 3 to 6 digit phone number. In Cha-Cha's case, it was 3 or 6. And you could ask it a question. So, like, why is the sky blue? All that sort of thing. And they raised over multiple millions of dollars to essentially have a bunch of people monitor this phone line and basically reply back to your messages of what the reason or answer was that you asked. As you can probably guess, as smartphones, Google, and the web became more readily available, as people, in the public had more Wi-Fi hotspots, had easier and cheaper unlimited data plans, had smartphones. This is around, when this company was founded, around the introduction of the first iPhone. Being able to text, just have answers. You had the whole web at your fingertips. So this kind of became less of a prevalent thing. And the company did eventually go defunct in 2016. One thing I will point out too, if you look here on the Lunavi blog, I will be making references to some of the stuff here. It should be this post right here. We do have an internal company event contest. So if you want to go give me some virtual points, or if you want to look at something a little bit more in depth, feel free to check this out. It's a high level of the same conversation we're having today, just maybe documented in text if that's a little bit easier. So the next thing you got to do is architecture, right? I want to be able to send a text message and have some sort of smart search engine in the back without, I'm lazy and I'm cheap. I don't want to have to write a super intricate, connection to Google, do anything super crazy. So, our end state's going to be Azure OpenAI, and we're going to flow back to my cell phone. Those were the two things I knew at the start. So to make it as easy and approachable for everybody as possible, I decided to go with LogicApp. My thought process there was, you may not be a hardcore developer, but you are dangerous with development, kind of in the same vein as people who you would use maybe power apps or low code solutions. You kind of understand development, but maybe you don't know how to write an Azure function from scratch or something like that. And I wanted to do that as a demo of look, with pretty low technological barriers, you can have an AI service ready to go and answering your questions. Then we decided on Twilio. The reason for Twilio was just because Azure, to use their search or their communication services for a text message, is $2 a month. And the tagline I put in this doc is, how do we reverse engineer basically Cha for $0? How can I build this for no money? So $2 is more than no money. So with that, I decided to go with Twilio. I'll show that here in a second. Essentially, Twilio will give you $25 of free credits, and you can then get a phone number that can send and receive messages for free. It's a trial account, but you can play with it and have $25. I think they charge something like 10 or 20 cents a text. So at the scale that I'm playing with this at, totally meets all my use cases. So I think the first thing that we should start with is maybe, how do we get started? The very first link here, and you can just Google this, is hit the button, getting access to Azure OpenAI, and we're going to want something like this. I'll come back to this here in just a second, but at the end of the day, you can come here, hit apply now, and kudos to the team managing this. I believe when I first started, you had to write very lengthy, I think it was 5 paragraphs of very thoroughly explaining your use case. This is open to the public, so anybody can come and fill this out. The one catch is the account that you want to have tied to this has to be a managed account. So no personal email addresses. That means it's your work. It can be, mine, for example, is a Gmail managed email account that I just had. And it does not need to be tied to your subscription necessarily, but you do have to apply with a managed email address. Otherwise, they'll reject you for it being personal. And then the other thing I want to pull down here is there is some use cases right now. Dolly 2, when I first applied, we were only at Dolly. I still have not been approved for that. I believe that's still in private preview, private beta maybe even. That one's really difficult to get into. Right now, the one we're talking about is the text and code models. So there's all these different use cases that you could be trying to use in your organization. At the end of the day, it'll ask you to fill these out. and tell them why you want to use Azure OpenAI. And then once that's approved, you'll get an email saying you've been approved or denied, and typically a reason why. So you can either readdress it and resubmit, or you can go ahead and start rolling out your models. One other thing I will talk about too is at a high level why you would use this service like this instead of something like ChatGPT that that's out there, isn't necessarily a wait list, and potentially has newer models, depending on what timeline you're looking at, right? But one thing that Azure does that ChatGPT doesn't is if you go to ChatGPT, their models and APIs, they tell you that all of the data there is going to be used back to retrain their models, whereas Azure will not. The only thing that Microsoft will save is they will save all the prompts you send it. So think of it like your query that you enter into Google, right? I just put like accessing Azure OpenAI. Microsoft will not store your data, but they will store your prompts specifically to see if you're violating their terms of service. So while your data is not going to be used to retrain the model, your prompts may be stored, and then there is programmatic things in play there to see if you are violating the terms of service. If it is deemed your prompt has violated the terms of service, they will trigger a manual human review of the prompt to see if you're misusing the service or not. One big, large caveat is you can actually go in and request for Microsoft specifically to not store your prompts. So if you're an organization that's truly wants like no data, nobody to see any of your stuff, you can submit that from a security standpoint and get that approved by Microsoft. It's just a little bit more, it's just another checkbox, and it takes a little bit longer because you need to specify like what kind of private information you might be using that you maybe don't want somebody outside of your organization to be able to see with your prompts. And then it's an approval process on the Microsoft side. So that's, I think, the biggest game changer of why you'd want to use Azure OpenAI versus maybe just OpenAI or ChatGPT, something like that, is your data is truly your data. It stays in there, and you then don't share it back to the model that at the end of the day, you don't want somebody to Google search something in OpenAI that's similar to yours and then get your company's proprietary information served back to them. So I think that's the biggest selling point that I would say for right now of why you would use that over the other one. Some other foundational skills here. We'll talk about this. If you go to play with ChatGPT, there are some models here. They have predefined ones. The one we're going to be using today, let me zoom this in a little bit. As you can see right now, GPT-4 is in Azure OpenAI. It is in preview, so you do have to do an additional request to get that. But it is here. So as far as I'm aware, I think that's feature parity where OpenAI is at this moment. And then there's some other models available. What you'll want to do is go through this and discuss, like, figure out what kind of things you're going to be doing with OpenAI. Because, for example, we're going to be using the DaVinci model. Since we're going to be doing a text-based search engine, we want to make sure that, we have the general purpose thing. It can do the most deductive reasoning. It can be as smart as we need it to be. The downside to that is it's also going to be the most costly. They use tokens, and we'll talk about tokens a little bit later. But essentially, you can think of it as like... I heard somebody in a previous conversation refer to it as like a Ferrari versus like a Honda Civic. If you don't need a Ferrari, you don't want to be paying for Ferrari gas, insurance, driving back and forth, versus, a Honda Civic can do the job. It's just a little bit different. And each of these are kind of fine-tuned to different things. So you can feel free to check these out, their use cases, and kind of see where you would want to put this. Based on your specific use case. Whereas DaVinci is just kind of the doer of all, master of none. It's actually a pretty sweet tool. So we'll go ahead and go to the OpenAI Studio. If you used any tools like, for example, Data Studio, we have our own little playground to play in here. there's two different things here that we can actually use. So if I go to chat, this is going to be very similar to your like chat GPT-esque experience. So I can hit a template here on the side. So let's say we're in customer support for Xbox. What this does is it's actually going to send a first message to this chat client or add it as a part of it to say, hey, you're a customer support agent whose goal is to help users with their Xbox devices. What this does is it helps precedes the model to know kind of what in the context we're discussing. And it also gives it some memory. So kind of like your chat GPT, where you can ask a question and it has some recollection or has some context clues to pull from of like, maybe I know the direction you're trying to go. So if I ask a question like, I can't connect to Xbox Live. And it'll start with, I'm sorry. And it'll have to give me some steps here to walk through to how to get better connections to Xbox Live. So wants me to check and make sure my internet connection is good. Best solution for everything IT. Have you tried turning it on and off again? Check the Xbox Live status to make sure Xbox Live itself isn't down. And then if none of these steps work, you may need to contact Xbox support. There are certain cases too where this prompt will give you a few steps and actually say like, hey, if you're having troubles, let me know and I have some other steps for you too, which is really cool. We can actually flip this to show as raw JSON. So if you see here, this is our response back. So we got our content of our request in. This is going to be our message to ask it. This is the preceded message that we talked about. So this went in first to say like you're an Xbox agent. You want to make sure that that's good. And then the response we get back from it. One thing we'll go to here is we can go to parameters. These parameters do work on both sides. So we'll talk about completions here in a moment. There is a max response, which is your tokens. So you can think of tokens like gas, right? Your car doesn't run without gasoline, even though it just sits there. What a token does is it allows the model and the service to run. So you can set a maximum upper threshold of if you want to say, hey, I don't want you to use any more tokens than this. Certain models also have hard limits of the maximum tokens. For example, like DaVinci has a maximum token model. However, you don't want to be going all the way up to the maximum token model because if the model itself is thinking that hard, you won't have any tokens left to get your response back. So best practice is to put it somewhere in the middle. I think you can really fine tune that and play around to see kind of what kind of questions you're going to allow this to have. You can have some pre-written questions and answers. So for example, your chatbot could have some pre-existing questions. Maybe it's like 3. You're going to know roughly what your token spend is on that, and you can bring it down a little bit. Or you continue to allow free form, and maybe people just won't get complete messages. And that's the big thing. So if you noticed, as more text comes back, my token usage slightly goes up. So if you run out of token, what's going to happen, depending on where it is in the whole pipeline, is your AI model is either going to just get interrupted from thinking because you're done paying for it, or your message coming back, the cycles that get it back to you are eventually going to stop and you're just not going to get a complete message, which, depending on what it is, maybe isn't the end of the world, but just something to know about. That's ultimately how Microsoft charges you for using this, as well as deploying your models. Excuse me. So you're going to want to be somewhat mindful of your token usage, just to make sure that you're not going complete overboard or you just let people completely just DDoS your system. Temperature controls randomness. So we turn that down. The top probability is similar to temperature, but it uses a different method. So we have temperature low, but we have probability high. So this essentially means that it'll only reply back with things it's very confident in thinking it's going to be your answer. Stop sequences, you can put something in prompts to tell it like this is the end of the prompt, stop processing. Frequency parity is kind of like, I don't know if this is the right thing to make, but I kind of think of it as like DDoS protection. It's so if a single individual just keeps trying to hit your bot with a bunch of different questions, you can crank this thing up. So you can say like, oh, maybe this person is going to get more, we're not using as many tokens, or we're going to block you because you're just hitting our API way too much. And then presence penalty. So this is, if I try to spam it with the same question, I can tighten this down and say like, all right, Bob, or all right, the 12 people in the department are asking the same question. Maybe we turn this down. Maybe we do something behind the scenes to notify so we can have maybe a company all hands to answer this question or something to that effect. So that's it for chat bots. This is kind of like your out of the box chat GPT instance. It's pretty cool. Then we kind of can roll in completions. Completions I kind of talk about is like it's asking a question in isolation. So I don't believe there is connection between your previous prompts here. It's we can ask just a simple question and we'll get an answer, and then it's just done. Like the AI bot doesn't have memory. It just dumps it for you. So one is here. This is one that's really cool. If you give it kind of the rough there it goes. It was just being slow. Sometimes it'll go incrementally. Sometimes it'll just dump it. You can give it the SQL table and say, this is the query I want it to run. And it gives me a select back. So this is kind of the natural language to SQL being demoed. There's a bunch of different things here. You can generate a quiz, generate, translate text, generate insights, question and answering, chain of thought reasoning, generate an email. So if you want to have like, oh man, I don't know how to answer this email professionally or something to that effect, you can totally just say, hey, OpenAI, or hey, Azure OpenAI, help me out. And then if you look at these parameters, they're similar. We have temperature, we have the max length, stop sequence, top probabilities, frequency penalty, best of. So behind the scenes, there's a score of which option it thinks is the best for you. What best of will do is you can have it say, maybe I don't trust you to give me the top answer, or maybe I want options, right? So you can go to, I think one example here that's good for this is, oh, yeah. So generating product names, for example, right? Granted, we have in here a way to tell it to give us more than one. So I can do best of 4. And what best of will do in this case, it's not quite working, but it'll give you back more options. So you can have more answers or different options if you have something very similar. So this one in particular is asking for, give me options what to name my product. One other thing that's really cool here, if you go to view code, it'll actually give you the code to call either JSON, Python, C# or curl. So pretty much anything out of the box in the Microsoft world, right, can do this. But one thing that's even cooler, OpenAI service is essentially just an HTTP endpoint. So if you look at this, if we look at JSON, all you're doing is sending a prompt and then waiting for the response back. So, it doesn't have Java support natively, at least doesn't have the snippets. You can make an HTTP call in Java. You can make an HTTP call in JavaScript. You can do that in all the other languages. So theoretically, no matter what your application is built in, you can go ahead and make it a smart AI application with very little work. All you need to do is just take a prompt from somebody, pass in your tweaking parameters, and then boom, your thing is smart. It can answer questions. It can get prompts back. It can respond. It can do all those things like pretty much right out of the box for free-ish, which is super cool. And that kind of lets people, opens the floodgates of what can this do for your applications. One thing I will point out too, go ahead and do that. So go here. So I think that kind of shows how we're doing this. If I go back to the blog post here, now we feel like we've got a pretty good understanding of Azure OpenAI service, right? So it'll just answer our questions. We're going to make an HTTP call, and we'll get back some sort of response. Let me move this over here. Oh, shoot. 1 second. So I thought I was signed in Twilio already. And we're kind of working our way backwards a little bit here, but that's okay. So if you look here, I can go to my phone numbers, or we can go to messaging overview. I think it's messaging. Sorry, I was wrong. It's phone numbers. As you can tell, I use this a ton. So we can go to our phone number that we got here. And this is the free one we can text. And with this, we can actually do some hooks. So what we're going to do is when a message comes in, we're going to do a post to our Logic app. So what this is going to do is act as a middle proxy for our text messages, so we don't have to worry about, dealing with SMS, dealing with any of that. We can just text this number and have it go straight to our Logic app. So then that leads us to, well, how do we get this URL? We'll go ahead and go to our Logic app, do the Logic app designer tool. And this is a sample Logic app I put together. So just to have for the sake of getting quickly. So if you do when an HTTP request is received, you will get this link here. This will be auto-generated, and that's what you'll put in that spot we just saw in Twilio. And I'm going to want it to be a post method, because when Twilio gets a request, it's going to do a post to us. The next thing I'm going to want to do is, and this key will be rotated after this talk, get the URI for the OpenAI service that we're going to be using. We're going to get the API key, and then we're going to get this body. If we go back to OpenAI, it is exactly what is here, minus the prompt, because the prompt is going to come to Twilio. That's what's actually being sent in. The user is going to ask the question. So we go ahead and do that. Because I'm using this as like a search engine, and on my cell phone, I only want one answer. I don't want to be scrolling up and down through picking the best of. I just want the first one. Now we're going to get the response back from OpenAI, which is our body parameter here. And I have some examples data structure of what comes back from OpenAI. And OpenAI, the one thing I want to point out that made this interesting is, and we maybe won't see it, where is it? I can do it in the next step too if it doesn't show here. I could just be scrolling past it too fast. Yeah, show the next stop. So we do need to do a for each, because the item choices that comes back is an array. Even though we tell it we only want it to be of size 1, it's still going to return an array of size 1. So we do need a for each to parse through that. And then what we're going to do is do the Twilio connection. From what I could see at the time I built this, there wasn't a Twilio connection for receiving text messages, but there is one to send one back. So what we're going to do is read in that first Twilio message that we got from up here. I want the phone number this is going to be the text to go back to the individual. I'm going to have from number, which is the phone number we were given in Twilio, up here. And then to phone number, that's going to be what is used to trigger the HTTP request. So that's going to be my cell phone or whoever texts our service. And then what this will do is then pass a response back to Twilio, and Twilio will send us our message. And then I'm going to go ahead here and let me find. I can show what that kind of looks like on this side. Is it this? Yeah. Sorry, I need to clean out some data in it first. And this is what logs look like. So we can see here the text message. Everything that you're in a trial account will come starting with sent from your Twilio account or trial account, because we don't have a real account. They don't have a credit card. It's to help prevent you from misusing their free service. So this question we asked is, where is Google headquartered? And the answer we got back is Google is headquartered in Mountain View, California. And it'll tell us which direction the communication is going for, when it was sent, number segments, if it had an error, which you see here we did have an error. And then I was wrong. It's less than a penny per text message, it looks like. So for $25, you get a lot of fun to play around with this. It's a huge blast, and I will actually show you a real example of I did this. When is Global Azure Days? And if we look, Global Azure Days, we got back a message. Maybe I can get this to. Oh, maybe not. Global Azure Days is a free online event held multiple times a year. This one, it says, was from March 15th to 16th, 2021. I'd be curious where that comes from. But one other thing, that's pretty cool. I will share this with you. And there's a few other solutions out there. Cosmos ChatGPT is a thing. So what you can do is actually hit deploy, and I won't do it live on this. I think the one I have still works. We'll double check that. But you can actually hit the deploy to Azure button and actually build out your own ChatGPT client in UI. And this walks through how to do it in Blazor app, I believe. So Azure samples, Cosmos ChatGPT. If you look at Azure samples, there's a lot of them out there. Let's see if I broke this. I don't think I did, but. So this is kind of like your ChatGPT UI, where I can say, like, how big is the state Texas in miles? Oh, Oh, sorry. I need to hit create new chat first. And it'll tell you the state of Texas is approximately blah, blah, blah. And then if I go here, one cool thing about this is it'll actually save. Go to my Cosmos DB. Just a second. Sorry, I'm opening Data Explorer behind the scenes. Items. And I can actually see this. The reply back. So if you want to play with this, you can build your own integrated client. It is just a HTTP endpoint. So you can build whatever UIs you want it in, wrap it around any of your applications, and go ahead and get going. So that's really cool. I think a lot of fun. And it just really leads to unlocking the use cases of this. The other tool that I've been playing with quite a bit the other one that I've had a lot of fun with. Oh, sorry, I'm pulling it up here on GitHub. It's also in the Azure samples. And this one is an Azure search demo. Let me go to the original repository. So what this one does, it's actually really cool. It will do your UI. It'll give you a simple UI that you can type into, an app server, cognitive search, and OpenAI. And it uses form recognizer. But what is super sweet is, let me see if it has, does it have a live example we can use? Maybe not. This uses AZD, which is a new thing to me that I didn't know about before this. Oh, you can get some free credits from Azure if you click that link. Oh, containers, GitHub. So it doesn't look like it has a real life example. But you can use AZD up and AZD down, which is a super cool tool. AZD CLI tool. And it's the Azure Developer CLI, which I thought was kind of, the first time I read it, I was like, isn't this what all CLIs are, is for developers? But after I used it a little bit, I kind of understood it a little better. This allows you to be, it's kind of Kubernetes-esque in the sense that like you can do AZD up and down. So what you can do is you can list a bunch of steps and processes in place. So you can say like, stand up my infrastructure, create my local environment, and I'm going to deploy this just for maybe today. So that'd be your AZD up command. It'll go through and run all your processes. And then what AZD down will do is actually go ahead and clean up everything that you have, which is a super sweet cool tool if you're a developer and maybe have like your own MSDN account or Visual Studio account. You can deploy your real life production application in whatever environment you want and, maybe test out a new feature, maybe horribly break something. And then at the end of the day, you just tear it down and who cares? Super cool tool that I played with. But where that comes to here, make sure I have the right one pulled up, is what this search engine demo actually does. If you look in the picture, is this will actually take what looks like enterprise data. It's fake, obviously, but anything in a PDF format, it'll run it through Azure Form Recognizer, read it, index it, use Azure Search with Form Recognizer to index it. And then you can ask questions like this. Does my plan cover an annual eye exam? and it'll say, yeah, your health, this example is health insurance. Yeah, your health insurance covers an annual eye exam. It'll actually cite it, which is super cool. And if you click this link in the live application, it'll actually render the one page of that PDF where the source is cited. It uses blob storage. So when you click on that, you can see exactly what PDF that you can go in and see. One thing that's super cool about this that I actually found working on my own company's stuff is I threw in like how to enroll in a 401k, our employee handbook, our referral policy, those kind of things. And I actually was able to make this exact thing where it sits right now fairly easily just work out of the box. So if you want to do this with your own company's data, what you can do is go into this data folder here and just plug in whatever PDFs your company has. And Form Recognizer is smart enough to start reading this. One thing we did also get it to do, which was super crazy, is depending on how your prompt is, we had columns, I'm over explaining it, but it was essentially like a to-do list. And it was like, this should happen at this week. This should happen at this week, basically a schedule from week 1 to 6 or 8. And we were able to actually write a prompt that said, given this table, how many weeks should it take to accomplish our to-do list? And it was able to actually look at it and say, well, your last thing ends on week 8. It'll take you, and week 8's task takes 2 weeks. It'll actually take you 10 weeks to finish the entire to-do list. And it was crazy because it was in a very similar structure to this. And it was intuitively able to scan that, index it, and then answer that question to us. And it just blew our minds because just out of the box, it was able to do that. So I would encourage you to, if you're really excited about especially your own company's app data or any sort of PDFs or random things you have laying around, feed it into here and just play with the prompts and ask it questions. I think this really leads into, I keep hearing the term prompt engineers or prompt engineering, where there's an idea that writing your prompts well is going to be a very valuable skill in the future, just as much as like a developer today being able to Google is a super useful skill. So just being able to write your stuff in just the right way or just the right flavor to get the information you need is such a good thing to have, because as you start playing with OpenAI, you're going to see based on, just a few words in your query are going to return drastically different results, or it's going to make the model just that much more unconfident. So one thing this one does is if it's not I believe it's like 100% confident is the preceded prompt, it's not going to answer your question. It's going to say like, I'm not confident enough, I don't have enough data, or there's some canned response of if it's not 100% positive. With that, it kind of becomes a fun exercise of prompt engineering, right? Of how well can I write my prompt that this AI service is going to give it back the answer I want with 100% certainty that it thinks this is what I want. And it's just a fun game almost too, of like, how well can I write this prompt? How close can I get to exactly what I want? And how do I get essentially a high enough score that the OpenAI is like, yeah, here you go. This is what you wanted. And it's super cool. Like I loaded in our employee handbook and you could ask questions like, what is our VTO policy? What is our PTO policy? And it'll go, well, on line 15 of your page 15 of your employee handbook, right here, it says blah, 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 blah. So it's super cool, a super quick demo, and something that you could maybe make valuable at your organization right away is just pulling that in and playing around with company data. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It uses, in the particular case of this example, it does use Azure Cognitive Search, Azure Form Recognizer, and blob storage. Their demo says that you can change data sources. So that also might be a fun challenge of adding more data sources to your applications. But at the end of the day, I think that's where most of the content I've got at this point. I mean, AI itself is changing at such a breakneck pace. I think we went from ChatGPT 3 to 3.5 to 4. There's other AI tools out there. It's just crazy at the rate in which things are changing, and we'll see how things go. The next, there is a waitlist for GitHub. I don't know if you've seen Copilot X. So this is kind of loosely in the range of Azure OpenAI. GitHub Copilot, the original model, I believe, was trained. I believe the X version is going to be using the OpenAI's model instead of whatever version the GitHub Copilot was. So if you also want to be playing with AI in your data development, GitHub Copilot X. You can actually go here and request to be on a wait list. And I believe one of the perks, if you're planning on going to Microsoft Build, is they will actually approve you. If you go to it in person, I believe they put you to the top of the wait list. So if you're going to Microsoft Build, it's another freebie thing that you can actually use. If you haven't looked at this, it's pretty amazing. Not only if you've played with Copilot, is Copilot super cool and innovative, Copilot X is even better. It has the text box here. You can actually ask it questions. It doesn't just generate code and be like, I hope this is good. You can actually ask it questions. Ask it like, what does this method do? And there's a ton of content out there on like what it's going to do. Feel free to watch that video of all the things it's going to do. It's pretty amazing. And yeah, so it's using the OpenAI GPT-4 for development. So it's super cool. AI, I think, is going to be changing the way we do our jobs day to day, probably for the better. It'll make us all a little bit more productive, a little bit more out of the minutia of like, maybe boilerplate code kind of switches to maybe an AI thing. But yeah, I think it's going to be super cool. It's a super rapidly expanding field, and it's rapidly expanding even what offers Azure has. So I would say try to stay up to date, which is hard, especially in the cloud world, but specifically in this area. As new announcements come out and as new things come out, it's just always changing, whether it's, Microsoft's side for decreasing the already low barrier to pull this into your applications, or whether it's, Chat GPT coming out with a new model that does even crazier and cooler things. I think it's a super cool thing. But with that, I think that's what I've got for the presentation. Otherwise, if you're going to be at Microsoft Build, feel free to find me. I will be staffing one of the expert areas there. Otherwise, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. And with that, I will say thanks. Have a great Azure days, and have a good weekend.
Thank you very much, Alec. Great session. Appreciate your time today. And yeah, we have one more session today that's going to be going live at 4 p.m. So in about an hour Eastern time from now. We'll have Rob McNair from Microsoft doing a session. So looking forward to that. And again, thanks, Alec. Those of you who missed this session, you're not listening right now, but anyway, it'll be any of the sessions that have already been recorded are all up on YouTube channel and available in the Global Azure 2023 playlist. So on my Captain Hyperscaler YouTube channel. So thanks, Alec. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.